Good evening. Ooh, let me try that again. Good evening and welcome. Today we're gathering to explore an exciting and important moment for Lake County, the resounding passage of the 2024 Forest Preserves District referendum. With 2/3 of voters saying yes, our county has made a clear, powerful statement preserving natural spaces, expanding public access, and protecting our environment for future generations. Through the $155 million funding package, we'll see new land acquisitions, major habitat restoration efforts, and improvements that will make our preserves more connected, resilient, and welcoming for everyone. At the same time, this work reflects a broader regional momentum, as other nearby communities are investing as well in green infrastructure and conservation at unprecedented levels. Tonight, we're lucky to be joined by a panel of leaders and experts who helped shape this initiative and who will guide its next chapters. They'll share their perspectives on how we got here, what this investment means for Lake County, and what opportunities and challenges lie ahead. Let me introduce our panelists. Sandy Hart. Sandy Hart was elected to the Lake County Board in 2012. In 2018, she was elected to serve as a Lake County Board Chair. Sandy has been an advocate for numerous environmental initiatives during her time on the Lake County Board. Sandy represents District 13, which encompasses Lake Bluff, Knollwood, portions of Great Lakes, Gurnee, North Chicago, and Waukegan. She lives in Lake Bluff with her family. Jessica Vealitzek, second from the end, you might raise your hand. Jessica was elected to the county board in 2018 to represent Indian Creek, portions of Hawthorne Woods, Lake Zurich, Long Grove, Mundelein, and Vernon Hills. In 2024, Jessica was elected by the members of the Lake County Board to be the president of the Lake County Forest Preserves. Her priorities include environmental stewardship, infrastructure, investment, and responsible government. For anyone who's not aware, let me just clarify that the Lake County Board and the Lake County Forest Preserves Board are the same individuals. They merely serve in different capacities, and they're elected to the county board and also serve on the Lake County Forest Preserves Board. Ty Kovach. Ty joined the Lake County Forest Preserves as executive director in 2013. The Lake County Forest Preserves manages more than 31,200 acres of open space across 65 sites, making it the second largest forest preserve district in Illinois. In addition, the district is responsible for maintaining over 200 miles of trails and various associated facilities, such as its 3 golf courses, Independence Grove, the Ryerson Conservation Area, the Greenbelt Cultural Center, and the Dunn Museum. Ty and his family make their home in Lake County. Rebekah Snyder, in her position as Director of Community Engagement and Partnerships for the Lake County Forest Preserve, she is a member of their senior management team. In this capacity, she oversees communications, media relations, legislative affairs, grants, volunteer engagement, and is also involved in developing and funding strategic initiatives and programs to support the district's 100-year vision for Lake County. She also oversees the Preservation Foundation, which is an independent 501c3 not-for-profit organization and the charitable partner of the Lake County Forest Preserves. The foundation is in the early stages of a public campaign to endow the preserves under the district's stewardship. Ryan London. After working with Lake Forest Open Lands for over 20 years, where he was instrumental in the acquisition, stewardship, restoration, and financial planning of the organization's various land acquisitions and preservation projects, Ryan became president of Lake Forest Open Lands several years ago. Ryan has successfully spearheaded many public-private collaborations to facilitate numerous complex land preservation and educational activities and initiatives for the organization. Through a combination of conservation easements, outright purchases, and private donations, Lake Forest Open Lands has preserved close to 1,000 acres of open space in and around Lake Forest and oversees 10 nature preserves. Lake Forest Open Lands is a private 501c3 not-for-profit organization. Ryan is a long-time, maybe lifetime resident of Lake Forest, where he lives with his family. Now we're going to delve into the conversation about the future of our forest preserves and the legacy we're building together through environmental stewardship and public-private collaboration. Tonight we'll be covering 4 main topics. First, the origin of the Lake County Forest Preserves referendum. Second, the road to the vote. Third, how the funds will be utilized. And fourth, how the work will impact local governments, nonprofits, and residents of Lake County. We are not planning to take questions tonight because we feel we have a very full program, and hopefully your questions will be answered in the course of our discussions. So let us begin. The first topic is the origin of the Lake County Forest Preserves referendum. I think that Mr. Kovach is probably a good source to start this discussion as Executive Director of the Lake County Forest Preserves. Welcome.
Well, thank you. I think the origin really starts in 1958 when the Forest Preserve District, in 1957 it didn't exist, and a referendum was passed that started the Forest Preserve. And we had a really clear mission for over 50 years in that the Forest Preserve didn't exist. And so you needed capital to buy land, build infrastructure, needed to develop policies, procedures, a depth of expertise. And during that time, there was actually numerous referendums that were passed in order to get the capital to build what we had leading up to the 2024 referendum. So when I got here in 2013, we still had bond dollars from 2008. And so 2008, just when the equalized assessed value of properties, plummeted, it was on the ballot, and I believe, I wasn't here at the time, but I believe that the district actually tried to pull it off, and we weren't able to do that, and it still passed. And so the district in 2008 had $185 million to work with. Very heavy on land acquisition, but also public access improvements. And so come about 2013, there were still some proceeds left from that. We were still able to do some work. We still had some limited ability to do land acquisition. And clearly, it was still in a buyer's market. There was opportunities out there. And then, nobody wants to see their property taxes raised, and so we were very cognizant of that. But the pressure continued to mount, and that when are you going to start buying more land, and when are you going to start finishing some of these projects that you already started and you haven't finished? Just a good example, Millennial Trail, Des Plaines River Trail wasn't completed yet. There's still segments of that wasn't finished yet. And we bought, large holdings with no public access improvements on it. And so if the district owns, it's public land, anybody can go on it, but you don't have that accessibility in terms of, parking lot, making it accessible for all, people with all forms of mobility and how they can actually get out there. And so, I think as we went along and we saw that, there was growing needs, and we had a non-funded list. And so it's not that we weren't aware of what the needs were that were out there. So not including land acquisition opportunities. There was about $50 million sitting on an unfunded list of that. How are we ever going to get to this? And so I would say probably about 6 to 8 years ago, Rebekah, we really started the conversation and said, okay, how are we going to get there? And that, 6 years ago, there was not a lot of appetite in any way to raise taxes. So we really needed to make the case on it. And so we did that. And behind the scenes, what was going on is that as staffers, we really can't work on this unless it's on our own time. And so we needed to start developing the Friends of the Forest Preserve, and so that they could work on it for us. And so there was a lot of work behind the scenes on it. And so what was the inflection point on it? I think that it was when we really started to roll it out in 2023. We took it to the board in July at a committee of the whole. Is that we have a plan, and we think we can afford to put this on the ground responsibly. There was a lot of work that went into that number, and I think we're going to get into that a little bit later in one of the other questions. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that, but what is the right number out there? And so, since 2008, in order for the district to survive, we had to make a lot of cuts and a lot of efficiencies out there to hold our own. We haven't given up anything since 2008. We only continue to add and to try to make improvements out there. And so we had to be very cognizant of what projects would we put on there out of that list of $50 million worth of projects that actually either make us more efficient, save us money, or have minimal impact. And at the same time, something really key was going on here. We tested a question in our attitude and interest survey 3 years ago, and the question was around understanding ecosystem services and how important do the residents of Lake County find ecosystem services. And we were very pleasantly, I wouldn't say surprised, but really happy with what we saw in the results. Clearly, the residents said, you need to invest more. And so that's an interesting part of the number. And so when we arrived at $155 million, presented it to the board in July of 2023, it was about a number that had minimal impact on your property tax bill for the median house value of $313,000 in Lake County. And it had an efficiency in some way, and it started to focus differently from what past referendums did. And so in this one, at $155 million, it was $65 million for land acquisition, $30 million for restoration. And that's really key in that we've never had a number that large for habitat restoration. And the rest of it is for public access improvements and finishing what we started, but also key number in there, $9 million to maintain what we have right now. And so we built a lot out there. We have bridges, we have culverts, we have trails and stuff that need improvements. And so we were really trying to get in front of those maintenance needs also with these dollars. And so again, I think, the really, and we took it to the legislative committee later that month again. And that's when we got the nod from the board that said, yes, you should continue working on this. And so that's when we really rolled up our sleeves and started the actual process on it. So that's really how we got to it.
I'm going to just ask our elected representatives here, how did you coordinate with the county board in general as to how you were going to approach this referendum? You must have been watching the overall fiscal impact on county residents when you go for a referendum of this size. Maybe you could just talk briefly about some of that.
You want me to start?
Sure.
Okay, just wasn't sure. We're always really cognizant because, of course, we live here too. So we want to make sure that if we are putting something that is going to impact our residents, that it is really well thought out. And so we had a lot of conversation around what it was going to deliver residents. And I don't think we have it here with us, but Ty always points to this enormous map that we have when we have our meetings, and there's stars all over it. And it showed, hey, if this referendum passes, these are the projects that we will be able to get to. And it is really across the entire county. So I would say that helped us really think about, okay, we want to make sure it's going to be something for all of the people. But I would also just touch back upon something that Ty had said. He mentioned the attitude and interest survey. And the Forest Preserve consistently came out on top in terms of trusted government entities, how much people enjoy spending time in open spaces, how much they relied on Lake County Forest Preserves during COVID. They felt like it was a real lifesaver. And I wouldn't say so much that it was the members of the Forest Preserve Board who were really pushing this, staff certainly did, but I would say it was the residents. When you said the pressure was on, people would say all the time, like, oh my God, these forest preserves are great. When are you going to be able to open up this preserve? When are you going to be able to turn that farm field over and do this and do that? So I think that was a big part of what made us feel like it was the right question to put forward to the residents.
So Jessica, as a representative, when you would go to your constituents, what questions and concerns did they seem to have about this referendum?
Oh, about the referendum, or whether or not it was something that they would be interested in seeing on their ballot. I think, adding to what has already been said, I think it's real, the communications from residents and the pressure to complete certain projects in their communities. In my community, it was Lakewood. There are some important trail connections there and improvements to shelters and to outdoor play spaces, to a loop trail, and seeing some of those things through was very important to people in my community. Now what the referendum did allow for was for one of the unfunded projects, which is to create a new multi-use trail at the southern end of Lakewood and provide access for just thousands of residents on the southern end of Lakewood. I would get that question a lot. When can we have access to this forest preserve that is like on our bike right across the street? And so I think as Sandy said, the thought and care is always there. I can't think of one board member who doesn't take it very seriously anytime that we are going to look at raising property taxes or putting a referendum on the ballot. But with all of the background work that staff did, by the time it came to the board, they just put so much thought and care into the right number and figuring out the right way to go about this. When you couple that with our natural desire as board members of the Forest Preserve to conserve space, along with all of the projects we would see every month that we couldn't get to because we just didn't have the operational dollars, it just was a fairly easy decision by the time 2023 came along.
And Rebekah, perhaps you could enlighten us as to the role that you see the Lake County Forest Preserves Foundation playing in all of this.
That's exactly where my thoughts were going. Where did this groundswell of support came from? It came from many, many grant opportunities passing us by, and I'm thinking of one that we partnered with Lake Forest Open Lands Association on around the Middle Fork Savannah, I think it was, the Shikal Rivers program. It's just one specific grant program that lacking the matching funds, which we draw from our referendum-funded capital projects, we in the Grants Department and in the Preservation Foundation were seeing those opportunities pass us by. Opportunities to do work on district land, opportunities to work with partners like Forest Open Lands, and I hate to see those opportunities go by even for one grant cycle. So the district has been very successful in bringing in and extending the 2008 referendum dollars through grants and donations. And I think that was a big part of the thinking about the timing.
And Ryan, as president of a large and important not-for-profit organization in our community, what role did you play in encouraging this referendum or talking to the Lake County Forest Preserves District?
Absolutely, and I wanted to thank the League of Women Voters in Lake Forest and Lake County for inviting us out here tonight. It's great to see so many familiar faces, board members, volunteers. We, I believe, have been involved with every referendum that the Forest Preserve has done since the start, either leadership or with staff support. We helped get the message out. Ty and Rebekah definitely helped us with our talking points, and whether it was board meetings or meeting with neighborhoods, just how this could potentially impact, just like we are here on this stage. We have quite a few Lake Forest open land sites that are adjacent to county forest preserve sites. And this area and you folks in the room deserve a pat on the back, because the attitude and awareness survey, just how impressive it is that this region can support and understand and digest the concept of ecosystem services is a huge accomplishment. There aren't that many counties nationally that are in that position. And the Forest Preserve led an assessment in 2016 to actually catalog and with GIS map all the sensitive high importance habitat areas, whether it was migration, carbon sequestration, wetland valuation, that helped come up with their figure. We were on a steering committee and collaborated with the Forest Preserve and the Conservation Fund to make that happen. And we've actually incorporated those resources in our acquisition and project selection criteria.
Thank you. Yes,
Can I
Jessica.
just add one more thing? We talked, or I know I talked a lot about some of the projects that we wanted to complete, and a lot of what I mentioned were things like trails and infrastructure. But we were also seeing, or I'll speak for myself as a new board member in 2018, anyone who has a yard knows what it's like to battle invasive species, and if you let it go for 6 months or a year, then it just comes back like, twofold, threefold. And picture that over 33,000 acres. So part of what it was starting to feel like, you battle over here, and then you only have enough money then to go over here, and then meanwhile this is getting out of control. And so it was almost like a waste of money. We were acquiring land, but we couldn't get to everything and tackle it in the most efficient way. We needed more operational dollars to do that, and that was another big part of at least my thinking.
And back to Ryan, can you give us some specific examples of certain areas and preserves where where Lake Forest Open Lands collaborated with the Lake County Forest Preserves? Because some of us might be familiar with some of those.
So conservation is about creating change in people and in society, and organizations like Lake Forest Open Lands and the Forest Preserve create opportunities for folks to be engaged with that change. And so I'll tell, if I have time, two stories. I'll start with the Middle Fork Savannah, two kind of regional anchors and assets that we have here for the county. You think of the Lakeshore and Fort Sheridan, and the preserves around there, and then the Middle Fork. And it's easy to take for granted just how many little actions took place over the last almost 50 years. It started with the donation to Lake Forest Open Lands by a gentleman named George Beach in honor of his wife Jean in 1979. I believe that was the very first parcel that was protected in the Middle Fork, a little 5-acre island that you couldn't even get to without traversing half a dozen private properties. And that kicked off an ecological study committee. And though they're not on this stage tonight, the City of Lake Forest has been a tried and trusted partner in several of these projects. So the ecological committee formed kind of as an outreach ad hoc committee with the city, Lake Forest Open Lands. And it took 10 years, but we were able to, through several other subsequent studies, actually hired a Forest Preserve employee by the name of Stephen Christie, who wrote a couple of those studies. In 1989, we were able to preserve kind of the first 200 acres that's the core of that preserve. Over the next 10 years, several additional parcels were added. The public access, there was no public access from any major roads until 1998, when Lake Forest Open Lands partnered with the Carroll family and others to do the big Lewa preservation and development, which led to the preservation of Elwa Farm as well. That continues. I mean, we just picked up another 30-acre parcel that we've had our eyes on for nearly 40 years last fall. Last week, I was on calls with Ty and Rebekah's staff on a grant opportunity. Lake Forest submitted a letter of intent with the Toyota Foundation and the National Environmental Education Foundation to do pollinator work. And we focused on the Middle Fork complex, that 800 plus acres between Route 60 and 176. And we'll see, we'll find out. We're hitting submit on Thursday, but that's a big opportunity to collaborate. We're also doing work on City of Lake Forest property with that as well.
Did you want to talk a little bit about the McCormick Preserve?
If I have time. I do a 3-hour lecture on that one, so you might need the hook.
I think we don't have time for that.
But, you know, the Middle Fork, McCormick, you know, Lake Forest Open Lands received the first coastal management grant in the state of Illinois in 1977 with Lake Forest Garden Club and started work out there. And I'll skip forward to another garden club initiative, the Ravine Symposium in '08, that kind of put it on the map. And coming out of that, we did an outreach grant with Illinois Coastal Management. And that led to the formation of the Lake Forest Collaborative for Environmental Leadership, LFECL. And so, and which ultimately that led to the City Commissioned Sustainability Committee. That was a great group of school districts, private citizens, but it was an outreach grant that caught the eyes of the Army Corps of Engineers to do a feasibility study in 2013, which ultimately led to the Great Lakes Fisheries and Ecosystem Restoration Grant, which we partnered with the City of Lake Forest, Lake County Forest Preserve, as well as Open Lands Lakeshore, which is now part of the county's holdings. And we're able to institute transformational change that not only got more people out onto these sites and engaged, but demonstrated with nature-based solutions how you can do better, lasting, quality projects that create habitat, but also address some of the structural problems with ravines, with erosion and water quality.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
You know, just a couple of follow-ups on some of the comments here. One of them, in terms of ecosystem services with this referendum and what we have available to us, we're targeting $30 million a year. That's every year, because we want to purchase 2,000 acres and we want to restore 2,000 acres. So in that $8,000 an acre that's restored and functioning at its highest level, that's how we get to that. That's actually $32 million. Right now, the way the district sits right now, and we have a lot of land that's not restored and functioning the way that we want it to, we're at about $185 million a year. I always say these are very nebulous numbers because it's not money that actually comes in, but it's real. It's air quality, it's groundwater recharge, it's water quality, it's health and wellness to be able to get out, it's carbon sequestration, and that's a big emphasis on where we're going right now against what the district has in its long-term strategic plan, which is, I think Rebekah mentioned, you know, a 100-year vision of where Lake County will be. Okay, so how many years do we have left on that? We have 86 years or 87 years to complete that. So, but there was recently a great big inflection point on moving forward to that, because in our vision, it is not about the district's holdings. It's about the rest of the landscape. So we're assuming, let's just say, I wish it was more, but let's just say that 20% of the land in Lake County is protected in some way in perpetuity. That's not what we're worried about. We're worried about the other 80% of the land. And so when we did our couple of things, when we did our strategic planning, it was, okay, what do we need in order to do in order to maintain the biodiversity as it is now and only improve on it for future generations? And so what came out of that is that we would need some great big complexes out there. Actually, 3 of them at about 10,000 acres. And then we did that macro look that Ryan talked about in the green infrastructure model, and it actually came out to 4. That's what you need in order to maintain this. But this big inflection point just recently with we've had a lot of great gifts, but there was one from Paula Lillard, and it was $1 million. Actually, by the time we deposited, it was $1,020,000. And so what's special about this one is that it's not only the district, it's about Lake Forest Open Lands also in a partnership, because we have this pilot project around Middle Fork. And so we can hold our own on Middle Fork. You know, we got it pretty much restored the way we want it to. Yeah, if you go out there, there's invasive that you'll find, but we can, for the most part, we can stay ahead of that. But it's a losing battle unless your neighbors are doing the same thing. And so that goes back to 2013 when we did our strategic plan, and one of our objectives in order how we're going to move forward in the next the 5 years after that was that we need to have a pilot project to know how we work with our neighbors. And so we said we need an area. Let's go around Middle Fork. And so it's about 2,500 acres. It's 176 to the north, it's 60 to the south, 94 to the west, and 43 to the east. We're actively working on expanding that right now. So we want to know what are the challenges, what are the questions in that pilot area so that we can move forward. And when we got that gift, it was an enormous step forward into working on how we do that in the future. So, and so now, thanks to Paula, we have, we don't have all the funds that we need, but we have a lot of funds that so we can work together, Ryan, and make sure that we take care of that land. And so the capital investment that we're making in that is underwritten by the endowment. And that's a big key part of this, is that we're actively working on this campaign that we talked about earlier. It's not everything that we need, but it's a good chunk of it. About 1/3 is that we get this $30 million that we're going to put it, of capital dollars coming from bonds, but we want to make sure that that's not, just 10 years from now starting all over again. And so they were trying to permanently underwrite that, and I mean in perpetuity, so that we're moving forward. And so a couple of really big inflection points here in the last year.
And maybe while we got off of the McCormick Ravine area, I think it's of interest to people here recently what happened with Chicago Open Lands property out near Fort Sheridan. If you could just, whoever thinks they could tackle that question, maybe Rebekah.
Yeah, Rebekah.
Oh, okay. I think any one of us could tell that story. Open Lands approached us, and, well, is that accurate, Ty, or did you approach them?
Well,
we'd been
we nodded them for a while.
Similar to Lake Forest Open Lands holdings there in the city, we'd been working together for decades. It made perfect sense. They'd had to close their site because of COVID and hadn't opened it for a while, and they were struggling, I think everybody knows, with that. And I think the district, correct me if I'm wrong, elected board, said who better to take care of this property and than the forest preserves, which it was working not only at Fort Sheridan but across 64 other preserves. And Open Lands always was a fantastic partner, continues to be a fantastic partner, and they're key in the referendum campaign as well. But that transfer came with funding that they had raised and held in their own endowment for the purposes of restoring and caring for that site. So not only did the people of Lake County receive basically 72 acres of land from Open Land Chicago for free, but it came with a $1.3 million endowment. And the foundation had already been working on this $20 million campaign goal. So the Preservation Foundation was well set up to take that gift from Open Lands, the gift of cash as well. And now it is a restricted fund held by the Preservation Foundation for the purposes of caring for that 72 acres as an addition to Fort Sheridan. And separately, we are working on what it will take to endow the rest of Fort Sheridan, of course. A really wonderful story. They are on the table here today, but they could easily be here and we could talk about them as a wonderful partner of the Forest Preserves too.
Yes, Ryan.
Could I add one more thank you to the Forest Preserve? And I'll tee it up, but you folks could definitely give the details, and that's Oriole Grove. I'm not an elected official, so I can say my opinion. There was a severely flawed land use proposal for that property that always concerned Lake Forest Open Lands. And it was always, keeping us up at night, what the future of the former, I don't remember what they called it previously, but what is now known as Oriole Grove. And we could not, just like with the Lakeshore property and the acquisition and permanent stewardship there, we could not be more happy to have the Forest Preserve as a neighbor to the north of our very first preserve, Skokie River.
Thank you.
You need to talk about that, Sandy.
Okay. All right.
Go ahead.
All right. So, well, I was just going to say, I've got a little picture of our master plan, so maybe I'll just go get it. But if you guys are familiar with Oriole Grove Forest Preserves, it is between Lake Forest Open Lands and Lake Bluff Open Lands. And we just had mapped out the master plan, I'm going to put it right next to Ryan because he's the one who brought it up, so thank you, Ryan. But we were able to, I will give Ty a lot of this, maybe all of the credit, really. It was such an awkward piece of land that we really couldn't do anything with it, and it was an important parcel because you could have this long corridor, right? And so Ty worked really closely with IDNR and was able to present them with an option for a land swap for a property way out on the very western portion of Lake County that was close to an Illinois nature preserve. And then also, no, just that one, right? And then as a result, we got Prairie Wolf and then the Oriole Grove parcel. So that enabled us to really protect those two pieces of land because originally Oriole Grove was set aside for it to be a big concrete basin. That was going to be a stormwater project. And then after they purchased it, not the Forest Preserves, I think it was IDNR and Army Corps, they realized that it was never going to work. So being able to save that piece of land was so important. And we have a volunteer steward who has donated a lot of time and money and resources. And if you haven't been back there in a while, I would really suggest that you get back out there. It is spectacular. So, and there's a lot more to be done, but there's a lot that's been done in the meantime. So thank you for mentioning that, Ryan. Appreciate it. Thanks,
so we've
Melanie.
talked about Lake Forest Open Lands as a private not-for-profit, but the county goes beyond Lake Forest and its environs. So and maybe Jessica can give us some insight to this. Are there other not-for-profits that the Forest Preserve has been working with on a regular basis in the county?
Gosh, that's a good question. I don't know. That might be a question for Ty or Rebekah because I hear so much about open lands. And all I'm thinking about right now is my local Ancient Oaks, but we haven't worked with them. Well, we've worked with the Citizens for Conservation, but remind me on which specific projects.
Grassy Lake.
Grassy
Cooper
Lake.
Marsh.
Yes.
Yeah.
Barrington
And that-
Area Greenways.
Yeah, the Greenway.
Fox River.
Fox River. Yeah, the Friends. Is it Friends of the Fox River? Fox River
No,
Watershed Group.
It's Citizens for Conservation.
Citizens. Oh, okay, sure. So yeah, I don't. It's ongoing and constant, and I think whenever there's an opportunity to preserve land, build a connection, help a local community in applying for grants, then we utilize it. I don't think there's any opportunity that we pass up if it makes sense.
How about organizations like the Nature Conservancy or the Sierra Club or some of those even larger organizations?
Are you interested in that in the context of the referendum as well? Can I
Yes.
sing their praises in the context of the referendum campaign and the road to the vote?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We're moving on to our
nice
next topic.
Nice, right?
That was a great
That's all I've been
segue.
thinking about.
Thank you.
So certainly working in co-stewarding the landscape together, Citizens for Conservation is an excellent example. I have to mention Lake Bluff Open Lands Association. I see some nodding heads here. Small but mighty group. And of course, Lake Forest Open Lands Association. Open Land Chicago when they held property next to Fort Sheridan, but even now that continues through community engagement efforts and volunteer recruitment efforts. We've partnered with Open Land Chicago on providing information and training to landscapers so that they understand replacements for buckthorn, our Healthy Hedges message, which isn't just our message, it's a message of all our partners. Those are some of the main examples that come to mind. And then when it came to the work of this referendum, I guess I'm going to go to the road, if you don't mind. It wasn't just me, but I was the internal staff point person, I would say, on the progress of putting this referendum campaign together. So that really started in about August of 2023, which is when the board gave their direction. Okay, this is a thing, let's move on it. And only Ryan at this table was around the last time the district, actively involved with the Forest Preserves the last time we asked the voters for their support in 2008. So it was new to everybody. One of the things that I started to do is to try to understand how it passed the last time and then understand what might have changed since 2008. It's reasonable to think that a lot might have. And those were Trust for Public Land was a great partner in that, both at the beginning and then certainly through the end and through Election Day. Also, Open Land Chicago was an advisor, I would say, active participant at the end. Those were the individuals with very, late nights, meetings multiple times a week. So those are some of the institutions that helped, that kind of over the year that passed between August of 2023 and really the start of the public information campaign, which is about a year later. So that first year of work was gathering these individuals and organizations to help with their expertise, help me, help Ty, help our board, help us kind of map out the path to November 5th. So that was about a year of just lots of phone calls and frankly making some, kind of silly decisions now that I look back on it. But bringing people together and just bringing them all along individually, making them understand the argument we wanted to make to the voters and where it came from, this deep thought that we've already talked about for the first part of this presentation. At the same time, getting people to agree to become members of the Friends of the Lake County Forest Preserves. Ended up being about 20 individuals, some of whom represented these organizations that were so key, like Open Lands, Chicago, and Trust for Public Land. But individuals who'd never done this work before, who brought passion and energy. That was kind of a magical mix, to have the passion and energy along with the skilled experts in this. It was just lots of meetings on our own time, to be honest with you, because there needed to be that connection between the staff and the board and the elected board, but kind of after hours, keeping kind of an ongoing process of education of these, say, 20 core members who worked on this for us. So that was quite a long time running. We, of course, did by spring of 2024, we did a voter poll with insight from some of the members of the Friends of the Lake County Forest Preserves, especially the kind of experts who'd done this all over the country. That was key. And we decided to only test one question. The reason for that is we knew, because these agencies, these experts who have done this before us many times, told us what the sweet spot would be for the average voter in Lake County. And so our number, which it was actually pretty perfect, the number that the staff and the board most wanted, $155 million, was about $32 per year on a $300,000 house in Lake County, right in the middle of the sweet spot that, say, Trust for Public Land says you need to hit. So that was fortuitous. And then there was the process of raising the funding. Now, again, on our private time, which is all that Ty and I could do, we were helpful in that. But really, it was the Friends of the Lake County Forest Preserves who secured that funding. We ended up raising, the target was $300,000 to support the campaign that our kind of experts in the group thought we would need to run. We ended up raising $345,000. We did spend a little more than the target. We ended up spending about $325,000 of that to do the campaign. The original voter poll, we thought with a really good campaign, we'd hit 62%. So as you know, we hit almost 67%, which was amazing. And we realized we maybe could have spent less money, but who knew? You didn't want to risk it, right? The main funder to the campaign, which is not the case in the past, was the Preservation Foundation of the Lake County Forest Preserve. So really, the board's leadership around the foundation, Ty's time and energy, and my time and energy, of course, actually Mr. Rummel's time and energy, you're sitting in the audience as well, and lots of other people. We've been building up that foundation really since 2008, or just before 2008, and it didn't exist in the past. So it was really appropriate that the Preservation Foundation was the lead funder to the Friends of the Lake County Forest Preserves, along with other organizations like Lake Forest Open Lands, a number of other, Open Lands Chicago gave some funding, Trust for Public Land, and individual donors. Yeah, we probably could have spent a little less than we did, but you just don't know, and you don't want to fall short on election day and think I could have spent another $20,000. Did I cover it all?
Great.
What did I miss, guys?
Great. Anything? Yes,
Yes.
go ahead.
Maybe just a little more on
Yeah.
the number. I talked about that earlier, and you talked about it in a lot of different ways. And so that was the sweet spot, the $155 million. But also, it's what we can responsibly put on the ground. We've at our capital improvement 10-year project list that we just went through earlier this year. we pushed that out over 10 years. It's going to take us 10 years to spend that. And the land acquisition is a bit easier, but the actual public access, the improvement projects and stuff, those will take us a long time because we don't have the staff capacity that we had back in 2008. As I said earlier, we're sort of, capital-wise, we're sitting pretty good right now, but operationally, yeah, we got a problem. we got to be really careful. We're still down we're not a big organization, just over 200 some employees. We're down 30, and so those 30 staff members that we're still down from 2008. It's all those that would do the planning and engineering and putting the stuff on the ground. Anytime we've had capacity in the last 12 years, we put that into our grounds maintenance staff. Those are maintaining the preserves. We haven't, through attrition, we haven't been filling those other positions. And so we got to be really thoughtful about that. The district has rate caps for our general fund and our development fund. And we hit those rate caps. We can't go any further. And so there's no place for us to go. Only way that we can do more is through efficiencies other than the capital dollars.
So go ahead.
I felt like I stopped the story with the Friends. It was a critical piece of it, running the political campaign. But at the same time, the work of communicating with the public was going on, starting with our elected board and the staff leadership. And it's just, I would be remiss if I didn't say explain that the main question I got, and I answered every single one of them, and others helped, of course, but I kind of took responsibility for making sure every question was answered, every phone call was returned. But the main question often, believe it or not, was why isn't this bigger? And it's exactly what Ty was just explaining. I think we made a controversial decision in our communications staff. So this is the public side, the department within the forest preserves that sent out public information, not vote yes information, but what this referendum would do. It was a bit controversial to send to every single resident in Lake County, but we did. We created a fact sheet, front and back, beautifully designed, and put it in every single household. It didn't matter if they were voters. They didn't have to be citizens. They were just residents who are welcome in the forest preserves. And that piece was trying to paint the whole picture and explain exactly what Ty was talking about. And I was so surprised that the number one question was, why isn't this bigger? Okay.
Because.
Yeah. Well, how much time you got?
So Jessica and Sandy, as public officials, did you go out to your constituents and encourage this vote, or did you have some restrictions?
There are restrictions. We cannot advocate for the referendum, but we can provide information. And so just to be extra cautious and safe, every time I did, for instance, I hosted a Zoom chat, but it was with Rebekah and with staff. I mean, you don't ever want to cross the line unintentionally, but no, we did, whenever possible, provide information, whether it was at, out in the community at other meetings, what's going on with the forest reserves, what's going on with the county board, and we would, or I would, of course, bring up the referendum, but we were limited by how we could talk about it.
Yeah. Same. Rebekah came to an event that I had in Lake Bluff and talked about the referendum and what the work would look like, what could be done with that amount of money. And so that was really helpful. But yeah, you have to be really careful. And it is about just informing the public. It's not our role to be an advocate for it, right? We put it on the ballot. We voted to do that. And then it's really up to us just to provide the information as best we can. So that's what we did. And I serve on Lake Bluff Open Lands, which they did put something out to say, or we did, but I couldn't be there for that vote because that wouldn't be appropriate.
Yeah, that was
right?
the work of our friends, like Forest Open Lands, that sent vote yes camp materials on our behalf, on the Friends' behalf, rather.
And Ryan, how did Lake Forest Open Lands participate in?
Well, we supported it financially through donations, as allowed on our 990. There's a percentage of our budget that we're allowed to do these things with, like we have all throughout the referendums in the past. I forget the first one when it was, I want to say in the 90s, 92, 93, somewhere in there. And just, promulgating the good work and the good outcomes of this with as many folks as we can. Just to kind of paint a broader scale, I mean, we're in a land protection moonshot period right here. We're losing 150 acres of open space nationally every hour, 40 acres of working lands every hour. That's 1.6 million acres every year, which is bigger than the Grand Canyon National Park. Working lands alone, in the next 15 years, they're projecting that we're going to lose 18 million acres. That's the size of South Carolina. So now is the time when we have to focus on the great data set that the Forest Preserve has established over the last 15 years, because we might not have another chance.
Thank you. Yes.
To Ryan's point, so in the spring of 2024, there was a couple of opportunities out there for land acquisition that if we didn't act on it, we would have lost it. And so the board authorized a $20 million limited bond in front of the referendum without hesitation. And so there was 18 acres that's currently under contract at Fort Sheridan. We still haven't closed on it yet. We're very hopeful. We're working with the federal government on that, so it's going to take us a while. We purchased at the same time, or right behind that, was called the Claremont property up at Greenbelt. We really wanted to be equitable in how we distributed those funds, and it was just perfect timing. There was a piece at Cuba Marsh. I mean, if we had lost that piece, there's no other opportunities there. We were able to get that and some very critical holdings at Lakewood. So to your point, Ryan, is that it's now, and our board recognized that. And we actually asked for 12 million, and you guys said, no, go get 20 million and get this work done. And so actually another 155 million, there's another 20 million on top of that we had access to. So.
Well, you, again, given us a great segue into the next topic, which is how these funds will be utilized going forward. And I think you've all touched on that a little bit, but if you could maybe, expand and give us some specific projects that you'll be working on with these funds and acquisition opportunities.
Sure. I can start out and then, fill in where I missed stuff. And so I said earlier, so of the 155 million, 65 million will be for land acquisition, plus the 20 million in limited bonds that were let earlier in 2024. We're doing $30 million for habitat restoration, and then the other $60 million will be for public access improvements for projects we already started, or for large holdings that we have that don't currently have public access. I'll give you some examples of those in a minute, but the key to it is that we wanted equitable distribution across the county, and so if we had we have maps. If anybody wants it, please reach out to me. We can show you how this is laid out across the county. But so I'll give you some examples. In 2025, we only intend to let $6 million, or about 6.5 million. Of those bonds, and that's really gearing up for the projects. And so we got to do planning and phase one engineering and get ready for everything. And so big ones, we want to complete the Millennial Trail. And so there's any segment that the district is responsible for is now funded. We just have to let the bonds. There's large segments of that are the responsibility of either Lake Dot or IDOT. But our portions are funded. Sandy mentioned earlier Oriole Grove. Oriole Grove is going to be restored, and it's going to have public access improvements. We want to improve the access in terms of the trail system there. We don't intend to be providing a parking lot or anything at this time. So Fort Sheridan has a big chunk of that because we have the 71, almost 72 acres that was gifted to us from Open Lands Chicago, and then we're hoping to add this additional 18 acres that's under contract right now, And we never quite finished phase one of the Fort Sheridan master plan, so some improvements there. Lake Marie, way up in the southwest part of the county. Northwest, thank you. Yeah, northwest part of the county. We purchased that back around 2000. I think you were around 2012.
Yeah, I was there.
You know, everybody has a great idea how that should be used, and so we want to get that done, and we want to get some improvements there. So that's a big one. Let me see. Lakewood is huge for us. Lakewood is our largest single holding in terms of a preserve. It's just been sort of cobbled together over the history of the site. And so back in 2012, when I got here, let's start out from scratch. Let's have a new vision here. Just a little story on that. I'm an open space person. I used to think everything needs to just be maintained as open space. I didn't get the playgrounds. I didn't get the loop trails and all that. I get it now because I have 2 children. So I get it now. And so we looked at Lakewood and we said, okay, we need to make this a destination and we need to do this differently. And so there's 2 phases to that. We weren't able to get through complete phase 1. Phase 1 does include a hard surface loop trail, a lot of improvements, a lot of reduced impervious surface. And something I would add here as we talk about this is that when we do our improvements in public access, we right size it. Let me see, Sandy, you were around, Mike, you were around when we did Fort Sheridan. We were pushed really hard to put a 120-car parking lot there. We said, let's stop for a moment. That's not what we're about. We're about providing the right size and not putting more of a footprint on the ground than is necessary. So the very land that we're trying to protect isn't, paved over here. And so we went on about 18 months of collecting data. And we said, you know what? Now this might be a little outdated now because it's really popular, but there was only 3 days out of the year where we couldn't accommodate everybody in a 45-car parking lot along with what we had at the cemetery. Again, that's probably outdated now, but that's the data that we have right now. So we're very, very careful in our planning to make sure that we don't spend more capital dollars than we need to spend. We don't impact the landscape more than we need to impact it. We don't create future maintenance needs and replacement needs. And so we're trying to be very efficient about that. And so all that for Lakewood, and that we greatly reduced our footprint at Lakewood. There's a critical trail connection that needs to go down to the south. I don't know the road. Maybe, Jessica, you could just talk about that quickly and how we're doing that.
Sure.
I think you know it better than I do.
First, can you let everyone know where Lakewood is exactly? There may be people in the audience who aren't familiar with Lakewood.
It's Wakanda is probably the closest community.
Yeah.
Jessica knows it better than I do.
Wakanda is just north of, it starts in Hawthorne Woods, goes up to Wakanda, stretches a little bit east. It might even hit the Mundelein boundaries. Mm-hmm. And to what Ty was saying, reducing some of that infrastructure, the paved surfaces we didn't need, some of the mowed areas we didn't need when we were able to finally master plan Lakewood, it reduces the operational cost by $1 million a year. So there are real savings in doing this, the planning for these preserves well. The connection, what I think residents were so interested in this trail that Ty is talking about, partly so that, as I said earlier, there's access into this whole southern end. Right now, all of the communities in Hawthorne Woods and Lake Zurich, to get into Lakewood on bike, they would have to, or to drive, they'd have to go up to 176 and go into the parking lots, kind of midway through the preserve. But to bike, there's really no safe way to access Lakewood. You have Rand Road, Route 12 on the west. You have Fairfield on the east. Fairfield's shoulder is minuscule, and cars go 45, 50, 55 miles an hour there. Milton Road kind of bounds the southern boundary of Lakewood. It is also, there actually is zero shoulder on that road. So the residents, including myself, are really looking for a way to access Lakewood more safely by bike and not have to drive there. But not only the accessibility, but if you then include safe, residential streets, getting up into Lakewood there and then connecting with the Millennium Trail and the rest of the trails in Lakewood allows you to connect the communities of Lake Zurich, Hawthorne Woods, Wakanda. So it just is a really nice connection point, and I'm really excited about it.
Jessica, where is this Millennium Trail going to exactly run?
Well, in
Some of us
Lakewood,
may not be
it
familiar.
comes from just east of Fairfield and kind of crosses over and then heads back up north. There's a map on the back here. It's in purple is the Millennium Trail. And Lakewood is that really, if y'all have it, Lakewood is the large green preserve in the southwest corner, and you can see the purple Millennium Trail going right through the middle.
The Millennium Trail is 41 miles, by the way. I don't know how many people know that. We've got, 28 built already? But
So where does it
even
start
longer.
and where does it end?
goes all the way up to Van Patten Woods Forest Preserve. So it's
Which
basically,
is,
all the way up at the border with Lake Wisconsin. Excuse me. Thank you.
and its
your
terminus
map.
is,
Pardon me.
and its terminus is where?
So where does it start?
It starts.
Well, it starts at, yes, it actually connects with the North Shore Bike Path. So
Okay.
we can't take credit for North Shore Bike Paths, I guess, but so it goes right into just north of Old School. Yeah, that's not the Patriot Path, that's a different one, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Patriot Path is coming later.
I get it all confused. There are a lot of,
There's
a lot
a
of
lot.
miles of trail in Lake County.
So now not only are we connecting forest preserves, but we're connecting people's access also
Yes.
through all of those preserves and for their experience in the outdoors and in the open space that you're working so hard to preserve. Our last topic.
There is one more there I think is important to mention.
Go ahead.
Actually, a couple more. Dog parks, so Prairie Wolf being one very close there, and the rest of them, they will all be completely accessible to people of all levels of mobility. And so that's a big one for it. We're going to tackle all of our canoe launches to make sure that they're accessible and easy to use. And then one of the really fun ones is Greenbelt. And so Greenbelt has had, a lot of activity lately. I think we have about 2/3 of it restored.
Sounds about right.
We've been working to endow Greenbelt and Lions Woods simultaneous together, and we're at 1.5 million.
That's right.
So this is an important model because Greenbelt is getting to what we want for all of our preserves. And so against that 100-year vision is that they're completely restored and it's underwritten with an endowment. And we're very close to that at Greenbelt. At the same time, the infrastructure on Greenbelt is reaching that life cycle where we're going to revisit it, do the same thing we did at Lakewood, and really analyze how much impervious surface do we need here, what is the use pattern, what do people really need here. And so Greenbelt's a really important one. In terms of the timing here, again, these are going to be spread out over 10 years. Land acquisition could happen more quickly. As you can imagine, with land acquisition, a lot of real estate people out there say, oh, the Forest Preserve has money. And so we're working through all that, and we have we're very critical on the criteria for land acquisition. But that could happen quicker.
And again, the green belt, just for those of us who may not be familiar, is up Green Bay and North Chicago. How many acres is that total?
It's about 600 acres, maybe a little bit larger than that now. And what I love about Greenbelt is the Continental Divide goes right through it on Green Bay Road. So we've, over the past, say, 10 to 12 years, received a lot of federal grants through the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative and private foundation grants as well, and been able to get about 2/3 of the way through. But with this referendum, we'll be able to complete restoration of Greenbelt Forest Preserve, and having that endowment there, I don't know if we said what that does, but the endowment generates the money you need to maintain that restoration forever, so that we know we have the money at Greenbelt to go back and retreat buckthorn, or to replant native, shrubland areas, or wetland plants or things like that, or burn it forever. So that's a great model that we want to continue.
And our last topic is how will all of this work that's being planned impact local governments, not-for-profits, and you've talked the residents of Lake County in general. that's sort of a broad question. Does someone want to offer us an answer?
I'll start and it might spark, further thoughts on it. But 52 municipalities in Lake County? We know, we talk to every one of them, right, Jessica? Yeah, all the time. They want to know, we work closely with them. And so I'll just say that part. It's a constant conversation. And I know you're very active in that area, Jessica, so.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, what I was listening to our podcast the other day. Lake County Forest Preserves has a podcast. And if there's one number that would be, if there's one number that would be great for you guys to walk out with tonight, it's not this one, but I'll get there. One acre of restored wetlands, and you all, as we've talked about, are hip to ecosystem services and what that means and the actual benefit that provides in terms of erosion control, flood control, clean air and water, pollinator habitat, carbon sequestration. 1 acre of restored wetland, the value on that is $22,000 a year. Lake County Forest Preserves have 8,000 wetlands. That is $172 million per year in ecosystem services. So for, what was it, $2.60 a month, a cup of coffee, this referendum is helping achieve all that. And the return that we all get is exponential. I think, to Ty's point, we have been getting a lot of calls, which I think is wonderful, that people aren't necessarily looking to sell to just anyone. They want it to become open space. They want us to take care of the land. So I'll let someone else answer to. So 172 million.
Yeah, that's the number. I would just say for local government or nonprofits, but I'm going to throw business in there too, right? I think the fact that we have so many forest preserves here in Lake County brings us a quality of life that other parts of the Chicagoland area just don't have, right? This is such a special place to live. And I think it's really the identity of Lake County is this open space. And when I'm in Springfield and I'm talking to legislators or whatever, and I'm like, oh yeah, we've got over 500 miles of bike paths. Now I have to correct it, 700 miles of bike paths right here. We have 31,000 acres of open space, just in the forest preserves. It is truly staggering what we have. And so when you think about, hey, what does this referendum really do? Well, first, everybody wants open space in their neighborhood. Way back when I was serving on the Park District Board, I got to serve on the, whatever it was, like a task force, right, about what was going to happen with the Fort Sheridan property. Remember when it was a golf course, right? And they were like, oh, should it be a golf course again? And what we learned then was people were worried about their property values if it wasn't going to be a golf course. Well, actually, your property values are higher if you are near open space. So that's a great argument for property values. But what about just your quality of life, right? Walking outside, we're within, is it a 5-minute drive? I can't remember what we were.
10 minutes.
10 minutes.
From a forest preserve.
10 minutes from a forest preserve, every single person in Lake County. So what does that do for our quality of life? What does that do for how we live our life and how we spend time with our family, right? So I just think, and then my point about business, is, if you want to locate a business, you really need to have great employees and a terrific workforce at all ends of the spectrum, right? And how are you going to keep those employees? It's really expensive to cycle through employees. Well, if you have a place where people want to live and they want to raise their children and go to really great schools, this is the place to be, right? And a lot of that comes from, I would say, the work of the forest preserves and the work of our partners like Lake Forest Open Lands. So I just think it would be almost impossible to measure what that impact is because we live it every day, right? So that's how I feel. So anyway.
I have one thought on one way to measure that impact. I don't see why Lake County, Illinois, can't become the healthiest county in the entire country.
Mm-hmm.
And the work of everybody up here and our partners, it supports a fundamental ingredient in the equation of public health and subjective well-being. And with the response to the referendum vote and the folks that walk through my office door every day, there's a common thread, and that's folks that acknowledge and embrace that this work is done by us and not done by others, and they support it.
You know, to Sandy and Ryan's point there, in terms of a healthy county, think about it. We all talk about wanting to live in a walkable community. Yeah. We're working toward a walkable county. Mm-hmm. We just stepped forward on Route 53. We're going to have another trail going up through the middle.
And doing it inclusive, like you've said several times tonight, that really was important to hear.
Yep. And just and so the power of the money that we have right now. So I don't know if we know that exact number from 2008 and how much grants we generated as a result of that. But just one example, I didn't mention Waukegan Savannah. So Waukegan Savannah on our funded list here for the trail that continues that goes from Lions Woods to Waukegan Savannah. It's an $11 million project, probably a little bit higher now. We came up with that number a few years ago. We won't do that until we get the federal grant, which is an 80-20. And so the 155 is going to turn into 250 because a lot of these projects, especially when it comes to trails, are eligible for federal grants, TAP grants. So that's just one really good example there. I didn't mention the complete restoration of Waukegan Savannah too, which is about 700 acres, if I'm right about that.
772.
So, but that one trail there, that's going to be an 80-20 when we get to it. And so we have other aspirations around that. So we'll turn it into a lot more. There's a lot of economic power in this too. Everything that we're doing, right. We do some stuff in-house, but most of this is all contracted out.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Hopefully this has given you a good idea of where your referendum dollars are going and how a number of our conservation organizations are working together to preserve open space throughout the county. This program has been brought to you through the combined efforts of the Lake Forest, Lake Bluff League of Women Voters and the Lake County League of Women Voters. It is being recorded. The recording will be made available on the Lake Forest, Lake Bluff League of Women Voters website. Membership to these organizations is open to everyone. Thank you for attending, and thanks to our panelists for an incredibly informative and engaging evening. Thank you.
Thank you.